Hello and welcome to BurntMas, a 5-part video series where I drop some Halo 1 speedrun knowledge bombs on you all. Today we're talking about how to use FPS manipulation to do precisely timed inputs. Now don't get me wrong, changing your FPS in the middle of a run is a controversial topic in the Halo speedrunning scene. And before any of the techniques I describe here get used in actual runs, each community needs to have a serious discussion about whether to ban lowering your FPS below some threshold. But to make sure you guys know exactly what you're going to be banning or allowing, I need to take you on a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. Let's get into it. I'll begin by talking about Halo CE as the main example, but I'll briefly discuss the other games later. There are 3 main techniques that can be achieved by lowering your FPS to certain values. The first is consistent pause buffering. If you've ever tried to count how many ticks occur between each pause when you buffer the next pause, you'll probably have noticed that the number isn't very consistent. Well, it turns out the amount of ticks that pass between each buffered pause depends entirely on your frame rate. For example, by setting our FPS to 42, there will be exactly 5 ticks between each buffered pause. Here's a list of handy values I've found so far of each FPS and the corresponding tick interval. Now you may be wondering, how on earth could this be useful? Well, right now it isn't. But if this were to be allowed in runs, I could try to make setups for future tricks that relied on you doing, say, 5 tick forward movement followed by crouching for 5 ticks and so on. It could be really handy, but right now it isn't very useful. For the other MCC games, the pause buffering values are a bit different. Here's a list. The second forbidden technique is input multiplication. Once your FPS goes below certain values, the game will start almost skipping game ticks. In Halo CE, this threshold is at 15 FPS and will cause ticks to occur in pairs. The only real practical effect of this is the fact that your inputs can now also only happen in pairs. This means if you want to do, say, a 2-tick input, for example the POA stair skip setup, now you can only possibly input 0, 2, or 4, etc. tick inputs. So your window of time to do the correct input is effectively doubled. That's technically already kind of useful, though doing a 2-tick input there wasn't very hard in the first place, let's be honest. Again, the thresholds are a bit different for the other games. Here's a list. The final technique I'll be talking about is the ability to manipulate the passage of time itself. As we go below 15 FPS, the game decides it can't keep up anymore and begins to get slower and slower. Specifically, it follows this formula to determine how much to slow down. So setting our FPS to 5 means running at 1/3 speed, for example. Now, I rack my brain trying to think of an actual use case for going slower in a speedrun, but I think I've got it. People have been struggling to quickly find the visual lineups for the 2 new tricks on Guilty Spark, so why not just set your FPS to say 1, and now you have all the time in the world to find the lineup. For the other MCC games, this actually only works for Halo 2 and Halo 4, which is weird. I'm not sure what's up with that. Which brings me to my only contribution to the debate on whether to allow these FPS manip techniques in our speedruns or not. All 3 of these techniques are slower than just using a regular uncapped frame rate, and they don't enable you to do anything that you couldn't have done without them. Say what you will about accessibility issues and third-party softwares. These are all quite valid arguments, I should add. But in terms of the practical effect of these techniques in the speedrun, their only use case is as a crutch, as training wheels for people learning a trick. The fastest speedrunners will always be better off staying uncapped. The rest I'll leave for you to decide. Well, that's it for part 4. BurntMas is nearly no more. But what will the finale be? Well, let's just say, the bell tolls for Halo CE.